Yaakov Stern has a theory called the cognitive reserve hypothesis to explain the mechanism by which variables, including education, may mediate cognitive loss. Dr. Stern's theory posits that the absence of clinical dementia, even in those with the neuropathology of AD, Alzheimer's disease, on postmortem exam, may be related to biological and lifestyle factors such as IQ and education. So just to say a bit more about that, what Dr. Stern found in his research was that sometimes individuals who did not appear to be demented in life, when you looked at their brain tissue on postmortem autopsy, it was discovered that the pathognomic changes of Alzheimer's disease, that is to say the neurofibrillary plaques and tangles, the protein buildups in the brain that characterize Alzheimer's disease, were present often in the brains of people who did not appear ill in life. And so he began to think, what could explain this? What could explain the fact that the brain tissue looks sick, but the person in life before death does not look sick? And he advanced the theory of cognitive reserve, that is to say that individuals who are more intelligent, who may have more education, somehow can have sickness in the brain but not manifest this in life. It's as if they don't cross a threshold. And one way to think about this is cognition is like a tall ladder. If you start out with advantages, if you start out at the top of that ladder in terms of intelligence, in terms of nutrition and other lifestyle factors, and in terms of education and high-level occupation where the brain is exercised more and more, it's possible that because you have more steps to climb down before you hit a threshold, that in life your disease cannot be detected even though the pathology is there in the brain. So that is the theory of cognitive reserve. And the idea behind the study that I'm about to tell you about was to test, in part, this theory of cognitive reserve and see, does it hold up? How does it work? Education and IQ, as I say, may mitigate the effects of brain pathology by providing a compensatory advantage, perhaps through more efficient utilization of alternative or existing brain resources. Well, another study that I could tell you about has to do with this is actually a study done at Mount Sinai where I work with my colleagues who did this study, showing that individuals who are older are using different parts of their brains to perform well on memory tasks than younger individuals. It's as if people who age successfully and perform well on memory tasks are able to utilize parts of their brain to perform the same tasks that they had been doing well before, but with a different part of their neuroanatomy. Factors such as education and IQ may actually provide a neuroprotective advantage through a higher synaptic count, but these benefits would only last, according to the cognitive reserve hypothesis, until the accumulation of neuropathology reaches a threshold. So there's some magical line after which, in life, the dementia would be detected. So what is, in fact, the impact of education? Our study was designed to investigate the impact of education on cognitive loss across various age groups and stratify those age groups by different levels of cognitive impairment. We wanted to know, does education benefit the oldest old as much as younger old individuals? Do education benefits persist in mild cognitive impairment and in early stages of dementia? Or do they last only as long as there's no disease present? Our study was quite large scale. We were lucky enough to have access to almost 2,000 individuals who were recruited from the community and from a nursing home to participate in a longitudinal study of aging. Here we're talking about a fairly old sample. The mean age was 86, and mean years of education were 13.73. So in the United States, 13.73, that's about 1 to 2 years of college. 53% of our sample had education beyond high school. So this is a well-educated sample and also quite old, quite elderly. Comparison of the three groups revealed relatively little overlap, so we were able to separate our group into normal individuals, questionably impaired individuals, and also frankly demented individuals. And I'll talk about how we stratified those groups. We used something called the Clinical Dementia Rating Scale, and that is comprised of 6 domains. One is memory, one is orientation, judgment and problem solving, community affairs, home and hobbies, and personal care. So in order to derive a CDR score, you must have a separate score on each of these 6 domains. And then there's an algorithm to calculate the overall or global CDR, which is used to determine level of impairment. Now, if you look at those 6 domains, you'll note that really only 2 of them are related to cognitive impairments specifically. And that's memory and orientation. The other 4 domains are related to functional adaptation. How well is a person functioning in life? And this is an important thing to know about the CDR, because it's not just a measure of cognitive impairment, it's a measure of how well a person is doing in the world, how they're managing to be active, to participate in home life and the life of the community, to take care of their person, to solve problems. For example, judgment and problem solving. Would this person know what to do if a fire broke out in their house? Would they know how to solve that? If the kitchen sink was flooding, would they know how to solve that problem? So the CDR is a global assessment of functioning that's only in part based on cognition. Here are the 3 groups that we used. The CDR 0 is not demented. The 0.5 is questionable. They're on the line there between yes and no, maybe. And 1.0 is mild but definite dementia. They definitely meet criteria for a clinical dementia. So I'll just briefly run through what the scores mean. If you have a CDR of 0, it means you don't have any memory loss, or if you do, it's what we call in the United States a senior moment. You forget, but 10 minutes later, it comes back to you. So you may misplace your keys, but you don't forget what the key is used for. Orientation in a CDR 0, fully oriented. You can solve everyday problems, handle your business and financial affairs. Your judgment is good in relation to past performance. Community affairs, independent function at your usual level in your job, shopping, volunteer social groups, your life at home, your hobbies, your intellectual interests are well maintained, and you're fully capable of self-care. So that's a normal person. 0.5, everyone in this group could be described as I'm about to tell you. In terms of memory, you have consistent slight forgetfulness. You can recollect events and you're forgetful, but we call it benign. It's not interfering to a huge degree with your life. So if someone reminds you, you say, oh yes. Orientation, you might have a slight difficulty with time relationships. You might have a slight impairment in solving problems and understanding similarities and differences. Everything else, in terms of your lifestyle is slightly impaired, but you're still able to take care of your person. You can dress yourself, wash yourself, toilet, no interference at this level. And then a 1 is obviously more severe on all domains, moderate memory loss, more marked for recent events. The defect interferes with everyday activities. You're disoriented. You may be geographically disoriented. You may not know where you are at all times. You have difficulty in solving problems, but your social judgment at this early stage of dementia is still maintained. You have difficulty participating in community affairs. So if you go to a meeting, a social meeting, you may seem okay. Only if someone talks to you very intimately will it be detected. You definitely have impaired functions. At home, you abandon more difficult chores and more complicated hobbies and interests. And your personal care begins to decline also. Personal care, you may need to be reminded to bathe, to put on a clean shirt, and so on. We stratified our sample in terms of education. So we divided those who had 12 or fewer years from those who had 13 or more years. And we established, to make sure that we had face validity, we established that better educated individuals had better functioning as reflected by CDR level. And in fact, this was strongly true. In terms of the cognitive domains we examined, we looked at memory, executive functions, and also verbal functions. So neuropsychologically, we used a story recall test and a word list recall test. For executive functioning, we used a similarities subtest from the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale, that is, how are these two things alike, and trail making tests, which involve sequencing, and it's also a time test. Verbal is animal naming. That's what we used. How many animals can you name within a minute to test verbal fluency? Our results show that while more education is associated with stronger verbal performance at younger ages, the oldest old individuals with more education do not show this advantage. Rather, individuals who are better educated and oldest old perform actually worse than those with less education. Education did not mediate decline in memory or executive domains. In healthy groups, younger individuals perform better. But once mild cognitive impairment appears on the scene, education does not offset its impact regardless of age. That is to say, education will help you as long as you don't have dementia. Once you start to have dementia, then the effect washes out. So how do we square this with the cognitive reserve hypothesis? Well, our results are actually consistent with the cognitive reserve model in the oldest old. Because we're measuring overall functional level with the CDR, we see that the oldest old individuals demonstrate a tenacious hold on their overall functioning, even in the face of greater cognitive losses. That is to say that individuals who are in our oldest group maintain a higher CDR level while at the same time showing worse neuropsychological performance. And that is exactly what's predicted from the cognitive reserve model. The cognitive reserve model again tells us that with those reserves brought about by lifestyle factors, including education, that a person's functioning will be preserved even while there's more neuropathology in the brain. We believe that our neuropsychological instruments were a stand-in, a proxy for the neuropathology in the brain as reflected in performance on cognitive tasks. Thank you.